Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and we've got a bit of a show for you tonight. Some completely new information, some fairly, I will warn, fairly heavy information, but it needs to be addressed. And we have some intel. Some of it which will be a continuation of the previous intel, and some of it completely new. So we've got a show tonight, and it'll all be mixed in with news and views from around the world, and some interesting op-ed pieces that will have you pondering long into the night. And the usual questions and answers, where I have to repeat certain questions and answers over and over again. No, only joking. We've had some new questions this week, so it should be good fun. Right, let's get into the details of the show. And if you want to listen live, as most do, is... and the figures for the live listens have gone up 50% in the last rapidly, and that's good. And the link for the live show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881, and you can also listen live on what is known as the articles website called thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. That has the archives of all the shows, including the must listen to ones, which we've kind of been referencing a lot, as we have a lot of new listeners to the show, and some people are kind of unfamiliar as to what this show's all about. Well, if you do the archive of the biggest shows, must listen to shows in order, you will get the full essence of what this show and what this group's all about. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the MeWe social media alternative, which people have had difficulty finding. I've no idea why, but if you want to join MeWe and can't locate Truth, Honour and Integrity on it, send an email to this address, and you can, this is the email address for the show, for if you want to ask questions or make comments and proposals and whatnot. And the email is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. and remember, honour is spelt the American way without the U. We also have the People's Club donations website link, and all about the foundation at thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into some news items. There's not as many today, because I've kind of got it into more op-ed pieces this week. But President Trump administration said last Thursday it would no longer presume that many pregnant women detained by immigration authorities should be released from custody. And now this is a reversal of an Obama-era directive. You'll understand why that is after this show. You'll understand a whole heap more why. US Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, better known as ICE, will make a case-by-case determination under the new policy. Women in their third trimester will still be released as before, said Philip Miller, an ICE Deputy Executive Director. Just like there are men who commit heinous acts of violence, so too we have had women in custody that commit heinous acts also. And the Republican president has vowed to crack down on illegal immigration, including policies which deportees can remain free during pending cases. However, the Democrats and advocacy groups have criticised the administration for separating migrants from their children when they're being detained. But during Mr. Obama's administration, ICE in 2016 announced that pregnant women not subject to mandatory detention should be presumptively released. But Miller said on Thursday the new directive was meant to align with a Trump executive order mandating tougher ICE enforcement. 35 pregnant women are in ICE custody currently, all subject to mandatory detention. And since the policy was implemented in December, Miller said 506 pregnant women have been detained by ICE. He could not say what happened to each of them, but noted that some likely have been deported, while others might have been released into the United States. We'll have more on that in the second hour. The recently fired FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe this week set up a GoFundMe fundraiser to cover the cost of his legal bills in lieu of being fired. And Mr. McCabe managed to raise 6 figures within a few hours last Thursday, exceeding expectations and prompting the organisers to increase the goal of the campaign funds from $150,000 to $250,000. Really, like they don't earn enough, those people. Now, as of last Thursday, the fund had raised more than $200,000. I wonder which foundation paid into that. I think you all know. Now, Mr. McCabe, as you all know, was fired from the FBI 2 days before his retirement by the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, which was at the recommendation of FBI officials. And an upcoming Department of Justice Inspector General report is expected to be rather critical of Mr. McCabe. Now, Mr. Trump, of course, had said quite a bit, as he often does, and had long blasted Mr. McCabe publicly, which was largely for his wife's acceptance of donations from a Hillary Clinton ally when Jill McCabe ran for state office in Virginia. All very in-house. Remember last week when I said, beware the female partners? It will become more prevalent, that statement, as time goes forward. Now, shortly before Mr. McCabe's firing, Mr. Trump scoffed at the possibility that McCabe might retire with full benefits. He didn't. McCabe, who called his firing part of Mr. Trump's war on the FBI, authored an op-ed piece in the Washington Post last week, which is owned by Mr. Bezos of Amazon. Go figure. Describing his firing, he said he found out he was fired when a friend called him and told him he was on the TV. Ah, well, that's what happens when you play games. Oh, I should have put these two. Yeah, let's put that story further down. President Trump this week has continued to lash out at Amazon and accusing the retail giant of scamming the US Postal Service over shipping costs and evading taxes. Now, I don't know whether people remember a show Drake had a guy on called David Wynn Miller. Some of it seemed good and a lot of it was interesting. Whether it was all valid remains to be seen, but he mentioned about the US Postal Service being the money. It was them that drove the money for America, the US Postal Service. I can't remember all the details, but maybe this is another indication that certain things are changing and going back to the way they should be. So Trump lashed out at Amazon over the shipping costs, and he said, quote unquote, or inverted commas. While we are on the subject, it is reported that the US Post Office will lose $1.50 on average for each package it delivers for Amazon. Really? Trump tweeted, following up on a tweet earlier this week, that he accused Amazon of putting many thousands of retailers out of business, and that amounts to billions of dollars, he said. The failing New York Times reports that the size of the company's lobbying staff had ballooned, and that does not include the fake Washington Post, which is used as a lobbyist and should so register. And if the post office increased its parcel rates, Amazon's shipping costs would rise by $2.6 billion. Trump said, and this post office scam must stop, and Amazon must pay real costs and taxes now. Here. Where are we next? I'm going to leave that for a minute. There was another issue, yet again, Israeli stormtroopers causing death and destruction and appearing to not face the consequences from international law. And there were large crowds of flag-waving Palestinian protesters marched towards the Gaza border fence last Friday, and some of them were throwing stones, which is not advisable when they have tanks and missiles and helicopters and all kinds of other stuff. And that started the Israelis firing. That officials had said it killed at least 5 people, which actually went up to 17 if memory serves me correctly. And the Palestinian Health Ministry said at least 500 Palestinians were hurt by live fire. Rubber-coated steel pellets or tear gas fired by Israeli forces at several locations along the fence. And in a separate incident, a Palestinian farmer was killed by an Israeli tank shell, really, while he was working in his field before dawn. The process has begun as mass sit-ins organised by Gaza's Hamas rulers, but quickly spun out of control, and the Israeli military said thousands of Palestinians rolled burning tyres and threw stones at forces stationed on the border, and that troops opened fire at the main instigators. Yeah, so the main instigators were over 500 people, and you have to hit farmers with tanks, really, on his own farm. Palestinian witnesses said hundreds of Palestinians participated in clashes, while thousands more gathered in tent encampments set up at 5 sites at a distance of several hundred metres from the border. Such mass gatherings near the border is signalling a new tactic by Hamas, and one that might prove more challenging to Israel's military than previous smaller protests. That won't be the last of Israel and those people tonight. Let's get them all out of the way. Israel, as announced last week, there'll be a UN agreement about migrants. This really needs to be looked at, and we'll be seen in a different light following the peace in the second hour. And Israel, as they commonly do, have done an about-face and cancelled the plans now to deport migrants en masse to Africa, after reaching a deal previously with the United Nations Refugee Agency. More than 16,000 asylum seekers will instead be resettled in unspecified Western countries. I think we know what those countries are. And the rest, about 18,000, according to the Israeli media, will be given permanent residency in Israel. Israel's Supreme Court had blocked deportations meant to begin on Sunday, and the plan to send the migrants to African countries, which was reported to be Uganda and Rwanda. Really, that's really helpful for mass famine and death. Just send them all back there. Like a death sentence. Unbelievable. But this plan was condemned by Israeli activists and sparked protests. See, people often tar Israeli people all under the same brush and the same sweep. It's not the case. There's a lot of Jews who are campaigning against this government and the tyrannous military, IDF. They're tired of what's going on. And it's never reported on the Clinton News Network or any other American news network about the work the Jews do campaigning against this type of Zionist control. So a new plan is going to be implemented over a 5-year period, and then 24 hours later, Nutty did another 180 and went against the UN deal and formulating a new Zionist plan for the migrants. Go figure. And in light of all what's gone on, Turkish president this week, Mr. Erdogan, called his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, or Nutty Arsehole, as I like to call him, a terrorist on Sunday. I couldn't agree more. Escalating an exchange of insults that started after he criticised Israel's lethal military response to a demonstration on the Gazan border. Israel has defended the killing of 15 Palestinians during Friday's demonstration, and Netanyahu tweeted that the Israeli army will not be lectured by those who have indiscriminately bombed civilian populations for years. Really. That was in reference to Turkey. It seems to forget that Israel's bombed pretty much everyone in the Middle East for the last 60 years. Certainly 50 anyway, since 1967. Mr. Erdogan says, "We don't have the shame of invading on us, Netanyahu. You are an invader, and right now are present in those lands as an invader. At the same time, you are a terrorist." And in another speech he said, "You are a terrorist state. It is known what you have done in Gaza and also what you've done in Jerusalem. You have no one that likes you in the world, apart from a few AIPAC representatives, American politicians, dual passport people." In a later tweet, Mr. Netanyahu said Erdogan is not accustomed to being answered back to, but he should start getting used to it. He, who occupies northern Cyprus, encroaches on Kurdish territory and massacres civilians in Afrin, cannot preach to us on values and morals. And the Israeli Defense Minister has rejected calls for an inquiry into Friday's events. So they just carry on willy-nilly. Well, so it seems anyway. Right, that's the end of the Israel stuff. What are we next? Ted Nugent has now got involved, and he made some interesting observations in my point of view. Given we've had recent pieces on synths and whatnot. And Mr. Nugent lashed out on Friday at the high school students who have led protests against gun violence in recent weeks, calling them soulless and ignorant. He said, I feel really sorry for them because it's not only ignorant and dangerously stupid, but it's soulless. To attack the good, law-abiding families of America when well-known, predictable murderers commit these horrors is deep in the category of soulless. These poor children, I'm afraid to say this, and it hurts me to say this, but the evidence is irrefutable. They have no soul. In the interview, Nugent railed against what he called the dumbing down of America by schools and teachers, whom he accused of teaching students lies. Go figure. The man knows what he's talking about, in my opinion. The dumbing down of America is manifested in the culture deprivation of our academia that have taught these kids the lies. The media have prodded and encouraged and provided these kids lies. And that is how we end up with David Hogg. Here, Mr. Nugent. Perhaps I should have played one of his songs this week. Maybe next week. Parkland alleged shooting survivor, although he's changed his story at least twice, perhaps even more since, David Hogg. How can he be survivor when he was 3 miles away and rode in with his bike with his camera? Thomas, you shouldn't let facts get in the way. Well, someone has to. But he doubled down on his criticism this week of Fox News host Laura Ingraham, as advertisers continued to flee from her show over comments she made. In the past few days, more than a dozen companies have pulled their advertisements from the Ingraham angle in response to her tweet mocking Hogg for being rejected from colleges. Hogg went on to say, a bully is a bully and it's important you stand up to them. And he said on CNN that it is disturbing that Ingraham has not been held accountable for her past comments. And neither are you, Mr. Hogg. It's really sad and disturbing to know that somebody can bully so many people and just get away with it. What is even more disturbing, Mr. Hogg, is you can lie to so many people and get away with it as well. You are not a survivor. You are a bystander and an actor. Okay. We're coming for you, lad, and the rest of you fake actors with your agendas. We're not tolerating it anymore. So, people of the alternative community need to go and support Laura Ingraham. Let her know that we agree. And let the advertising people know we're not going to tolerate that type of boycotts. People are supposed to have a freedom of speech. We're not Nazi Germany yet. Here's another one. Mark Zuckerberg with an F explains Facebook's new system of favouring broadly trusted news sources. Really? Is there any? Broadly trusted. Oh dear. Via a algorithm, designed to favour established outlets and crush new media. Really, Mr. Zuckerberg. We're going to have our day with you as well. And that won't be too far off. Facebook introduced its new system in January, and the results were immediately apparent. Facebook traffic to established outlets, including Clinton News Network and NBC, soared upwards, and the real figures are soaring down, while traffic to conservative outlets fell. Facebook engagement, likes, shares and comments also fell across multiple new media outlets, including those on the right and the left. Is that the right and left of the page, or is that those stupid political boxes they create for you? Facebook engagement on President Trump's posts fell by 45%. See how they can interfere? How they can change where people go or lead them onto a certain path. Most people don't believe it's possible. They're telling you in the mainstream how they can manipulate it in such a way that the Trump's posts lost 45%, nearly half of them. Now, Mr. Zuckerberg explained these changes, talking about providing a more meaningful experience for Facebook users. I don't think so. But despite tamely couching his words, the truth slipped out. Facebook, he said, is going to act like a publisher with a view on what counts as quality news. And make judgments about the accuracy and reliability of news publications. Well, perhaps they should judge themselves and shut themselves down then. Got to be fair, haven't you? And he went on and outlined 3 categories of fake news: spammers, state actors, bye Mr. Hogg, perhaps not, and real media outlets who are saying what they think is true but have varying levels of accuracy or trustworthiness. Really? CNN don't even bother trying. Let's have a live broadcast from Baghdad from a Californian car park, and 2 people standing on either side of a car. Oh, the other guy, what's his name with the white that looks like an albino, with the green screen over Sandy Hook, right in your face. So kind of you got to ask, why are they doing all this? Well, it's control. But here's a poll that was done recently, and it tells you the real reasons why. And this is good news. A survey by the Monmouth University Polling Institute found that the vast majority of Americans believe that mainstream media outlets report fake news. A whopping 77% of over 800 respondents relayed their distrust for major news organisations in both television and print. Now, this is a marked increase from the 63% that was already sceptical a year ago. So it's gone up 14% in 1 year. Of those, 31% believe it to be a regular occurrence, while 46% see it as a more occasional issue of fake news. 83% of those questioned believe that special interest groups intentionally seek to implant the mainstream news cycle with false information. 83% believe that. Be interesting who they believe is the special interest group. Langley, Deep State. More so, 87% believe that those same forces influence social media such as Facebook as well as YouTube. And suspicion is not divided along party lines, although differences still exist. While Republicans are most convinced of the media's impure intentions, with a pervasive 89% distrusting mainstream media, Democrats are now up to 61% and in agreement. Democrats last year was only 43%. That's a big jump, 18% in a year of the Democrats now believing that the mainstream media is talking total BS. Those not affiliated with either party maintain a healthy skepticism of their own. Last year, 66% of independent voters already distrusted the media, and this year it has risen to 82%. Fairly hefty, that most people have no trust in the mainstream media. So you're talking between 60 and 80% across all groups, all political parties. That's why Facebook needs to then, because of that mistrust, they're trying to channel you into going to their selected sites. How about we not? I have a feeling Facebook may well close down in the near future. I can't see Mr. Zuckerberg surviving, being honest. Attorney General Jeff Sessions made a decision this week to bring in US Attorney John Huber. Well, most people will not be familiar with that name. You may want to get used to that name, because it may become rather interesting. As this move has the ability to combine all the powers of the US Department of Justice's Inspector General with a prosecutor who can bring charges. Think about that. He can seek indictments and get results for President Trump far more quickly than a second special counsel can do. Why? Because of this reason. That point is critical, because as Sessions' March 29th letter explains, the Inspector General's jurisdiction to conduct civil and criminal investigations includes actions taken by former employees after they have left government service. Then Huber can act on any of those matters. Big change. And this is the key part. Perhaps Mr. John Darash should take note of this. As a US attorney, John Huber has the full authority to empanel a grand jury and to file criminal charges. A grand jury can be empaneled anywhere, which means that it could be a group of citizens from Utah instead of the DC swamp that decides whether to hand down indictments for felony prosecution. So now you know why Mr. Huber was employed. The Inspector General's jurisdiction extends not only to allegations of legal violations, but also to allegations that department employees violated established practices as well. Mr. Sessions added in his letter, which means that the IG report, Inspector General report, can hold people accountable even for actions that do not violate a specific statute. And it is believed that Huber has over 450 investigators available to him before his appointment. Watch that space closely. Short piece. We've got a lot of issues to do with children. You're going to hear more in the second hour. But there was three news items this week that highlight the failure of not only America with its children, but Britain also. In a far-reaching report done by teachers in the UK was stating that children were filling their pockets with food from the school's canteen due to malnourishment. So kids are stealing, well, I don't call that stealing, I call that survival, are forced to take food and load it into their pockets due to malnourishment. They're reporting the staggering rise in children that have a grey pallor, which is an indication of malnourishment. That's in the UK. Teachers in Oklahoma, of course there's demonstrations going on in Oklahoma and Kansas, stating that they only have 29 books available for 87 pupils. Like I said, they're not teaching nothing. It's not always the teacher's fault. Largely it's not. They didn't set the curriculum. But something has to be done urgently about what's going on in our schools. You know, the advertisements here in Florida, and I don't know what it's like in the other states, but the lottery states it's given X number of billions to schools. Where did that all go? Because clearly it's not going into the schools. And then you look at your property taxes, and again, it may be different in other states, but the vast amount, the most overriding item of property taxes is for schools. Again, I've got to ask, where's it going? Because clearly it's not going into schools. It's not going onto books. It's certainly not going into teachers' pockets either. A Kansas teacher this week showed his paycheck and net pay for the whole month of $1,049 per month. That's what the teachers in Kansas and Oklahoma are complaining about. Yet again, another program, we're putting this amount into schools and that amount into schools, and yet there's absolutely zero evidence supporting that fact. So in other words, it's a conspiracy, and the point is, where is that conspiracy going and where is that money going? Because clearly it's not going into schools. Right, final news item before we get into the intel and the op-ed pieces. Hillary Clinton, whoever it may be, chimed in last night that the US is, wait for it, don't laugh too loud, witnessing an all-out attack on core values of democracy, she said. Oh, Lord. And this appeared to be the latest in a series of criticisms of the Trump administration. She lamented, whilst tripping down the stairs, "We're seeing a retreat from the commitment to embrace women's advancement as an objective of US foreign policy. I think it's very unfortunate to contemplate, but more can happen that would put our rights at risk, our freedom at risk, our values, our fundamental views about what it means to be Americans," she said. I have 3 points regarding that statement. An all-out attack, really? What about the values of democracies for the well over 100 people that you and your husband have had killed to silence them? Or how about the democratic rights of the Manor World Holding trustee, which you have threatened and sent people to delete her? How about her rights? Point 2, embrace women's advancement. Here we go again with the male-female divide card that they tried to wheel out last year and didn't work. But let's look at the female role models, shall we? You, Ms. Clinton, Condoleezza Rice, Susan Rice, Jarrett, Feinstein, Lynch, Thatcher, May and Merkel. What have they done to advance things, all things female? Are they really the role models? Because to me, those collection have done far from enhancing the female model, role or otherwise, and took on the worst traits of males. So please spare us with your female advancement bullshittery. We've had enough of it, Clinton. Part 3. Our rights, values and freedoms and fundamental views to be an American. Really, Anne? Our rights were stripped away a long time ago with your help. Values shredded by synth-style programming. And as for our freedoms, I think we have a slightly, well, not slightly, a vastly different meaning for the term freedom. Because your meaning is spreading hate, war, death, destruction and resource grabbing across the world. That's not our version of freedom, Anne. So please shut up before your circuits overload again and mind the stairs. Hi all and welcome back to the second hour. Right, let's get into the meat of the show. And there's plenty of it. Perhaps that was an inappropriate term for one of the pieces anyway. Let's have a few gulps and a few lights are clicking and we'll get into it. Intel. Not that much, but new stuff in a way. And a bit of old. As announced last week, in reference to the Citibank group, that is being broken up and will be parcelled back to the former USSR countries, including the assets that were stolen from them, largely by that particular group. Now, given its size, it will take a little while longer for that to all be dealt with, processed and delivered and come to fruition. But work has been ongoing this week. Wells Fargo is underway, and it is now expected to take 60 to 90 days to complete the process of transfer to a nationalised bank. There's a lot of things going on over Wells Fargo. A lot of criminal investigations. People think, well, that can just be done in a day or this. But there's a lot of investigative work ongoing currently, which is why things are appearing to be quiet on many levels. The wall, which is now underway, it has started, and it's also under heavy guard and on extreme watch right now. And the reasons why will become clear in an op-ed piece shortly. Now, here's the new pieces. There's an ongoing issue currently to do with time slips and time jumps. Now these, which I have noticed also and have reported to higher people, that they've been occurring with increasing frequency recently. And the reason being is the clowns are messing with time to try and go back in time and reclaim the covenant again. This is what's been going on. So that's the long-term agreement that was recently nullified and returned to the people, so they're not in control anymore. It hasn't worked, and it will not work. None of their bigger plans work anymore. I've been telling them that for the last 3 years on this show, but they don't appear to listen. But what it has done, it's created distortions in what we perceive as time. They will pass. Now, this is an official warning to the clowns. What you're doing, and the participants, lower minions, what you're doing is going against natural law, and punishments now are fairly steep. These times, these current times, not the ones you try to go back to, are not like the past, where you did whatever you wished with zero consequences. Those days are over, period. We will not warn you again, we will just act. And for those who have done the incursions, we will hunt you down, and you will face the consequences. The SSP, or SS small p, as it should be known, SS being prevalent for those who are new members. Your secret space program is Nazis, SS small p. They are still trying to gain access to the on-world portals that are scattered about the planet in selective mountains. I'm not going to give any more details, as it's an ongoing operation. And the reason they're doing it is a desire to fix or obtain more tech, so they can change the course of the way things are going now. Message to them also, you won't. Now, the underground beings, most of which are not human, are still holding firm and blocking them gaining access. It is expected at this time that they will hold that stance, as they are excited by the fact that they also are close to freedom as well. So they're pushing as well. Now, in essence, it's not too dissimilar to what Cobra described years ago about the compression, the push up and the push down. In essence, what's happening on the surface is we're rolling them out in steamroller fashion. Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Oops. So that's the Intel news for this week. It is rather short because too many things are very delicate at the moment, and we are in the end times. How long those end times will take remains to be seen. But like I said, there's a lot of investigative work ongoing at the moment where they're digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, the worse it gets. So there's, in a news item this week, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, has been admitted into hospital, allegedly for planned surgery on his hip. Personally, I would do surgery on his head, or preferably around the neck, which is how you get rid of those type of people. And the surgery will take place on Wednesday at King Edward's VII Hospital in Marylebone, and Prince Philip, who is 96, because he took the Kool-Aid, retired from royal duties last August. I didn't know he started any. He did not attend the Easter service at Windsor Castle on Sunday, and his absence is said to have been because of a hip problem. But perhaps Philip could do the British NHS a favour and share costs, share beds. Perhaps he should hop into bed with Nutty Arsehole, given he's just been into hospital. And the question for the day is going into hospital a new term for something else? I'm not saying anymore. Yet again, recently we've had more shootings this week, and perhaps the authorities, quote unquote, should notice that all the shootings are lone gunmen. Perhaps if we had more people with guns alongside these lone gunmen, maybe so many more wouldn't get killed. So rather than take guns away, perhaps we should give everyone within reason. What I'm doing now is slightly more lighter before we get into the heavy piece, so bear with me. Venezuela. I was speaking to a Venezuelan national this week, and she was telling me the conditions of her family. She would like to go back to the country. That's her home, she says. But she kind of has no option but to stay here, because there's nothing left in Venezuela at all. So she explained conditions. And people will remember me mentioning, I think it was last week or the show before, about Western perspectives of what is considered struggling in comparison to other people around the world. And I made the statement, many of us live like kings in comparison. That's not to say there's not a lot of people struggling, but I've highlighted it many times in this show. 1 in 6 children below the poverty line in America alone. But then she told me how much the Venezuelan people are being given per month. And perhaps your perspective may change. $2.75 per month. And it costs $7 to buy a chicken. 3 months' money. The people, and particularly the elderly, have resorted to eating out of the trash can. There's no medicine, there's no food, and no money. Where's the international outcry? This has to stop. Of course, the Trust did try to send money last year and it was blocked. It's time we blocked them people once and for all. $2.75 a month. People can send money to the banks, but the banks are not allowing any money out. They're giving them an allowance. You have to queue up 4 hours. People remember the piece I did about 2 months ago. where a guy who went to Venezuela as a journalist queued up at 4 different banks for 8 hours and was allowed to take out something like $6 or $4 to $6 after queuing 8 hours to remove money from his own account. Heartbreaking. So I've spoken to this woman and I said perhaps we can send some money, won't be a lot, but some money out of the foundation. So I'll be seeking approval from the other directors, and maybe that's something we can do. They asked not for money, but for goods, be it particularly medicines. There is none. Or perhaps we can go and buy them, and then she can transfer them over to one of the villages that will be beneficial. Not good. Now, you may start hearing about these people, or this particular woman. I can't remember the guy's name. It was mentioned in one of the QAnon posts. Jared Cohen. Not to be mixed up with Jared Kushner, although similar. But he has a partner called Jasmine Green, who grew up in the UK. And she works for a group called Jigsaw at Alphabet, which is a department of Google. And she was tasked with